This painting is my tribute to the times when it wasn't unhealthy to eat a hamburger. Nobody cared, and it cost less than $1. Now, what I did is I drew this out on tracing paper with a graphite pencil. Then I turned it over, and I rubbed the back with a raw sienna watercolor pencil. And I laid it on this 140-pound cold press. This is a full sheet of watercolor paper. And I transferred it over. Now, from this point on, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to paint the blue background up in the upper part of this painting first. And we'll proceed on with this, and I'll show you how I paint. Now, when I do this, I want to say a few words about it. I show you this simply because I want you to know how I paint. I don't want you to paint like how I paint. I want you to paint how you paint. And all these preceding lessons, you take from it what you need, you leave what you don't because you might need it later, and you paint as an individual. I've washed in the first layer of blue. You know, it's not perfect, and it wasn't intended to be. This is a table back here, so I left all the imperfections and stuff in it. Now I'm going to pull off the tape here. We'll see what it looks like when I get the tape off this thing. You can see road underneath this frisket really bad, but that's okay. You know, I can deal with that also. Now, what you need to notice about this is that it's lighter here and darker down here. That'll be important later on when I'm working with the picture. I want to show you how far I've got so far. Now, earlier I told you that this blue background was about all I was going to do. I decided it was way too light and it wasn't uniform enough, so I went back in and did it again. Now, since I had stretched this, it's very difficult to get a brush, like I said earlier, that cover all this 30 inches in one stroke. If I'd wanted this flat, I'd have went in with an airbrush and airbrushed it out, and then I'd had a nice flat surface. Now, browns are always hard to work, difficult to work. This particular passage here, I went in with sepia and laid down an undercoat, and then I went in with one of the specialized earth colors, hematite violet, and then I went over it again. I don't know if it shows in this or not, but it has a purplish cast to it. Now, I'm going to leave this as it is right now, and I might go back in later with a little bit of burnt umber or more of a reddish color and wash it in on top of this. The sepia really has a little too much black in it, and I would have probably been better off using something else, but I'm going to work with it anyway. Now I'm going to start. I'm going to do this paper mat back here. I always work, or try to work, from the top to the bottom and from back to front. I've done that for years and years, and it seems to work well. You can make slight modifications to it, but typically that's the way I always work. Okay, I'm going to keep on going on this painting now. I wanted to speak to a couple of things before we go on with this painting. First, I want to show you the brushes I've used. I've only used 3 brushes so far. This one, which I use primarily for the background and for some of the work up here. This small flat, and this a 1/2 inch flat. I like flats. I use a lot of flats because I can use them in different ways. I would like to explain what I've done. Most of my darks, the darkest darks, are already here. And most of my lightest lights are already here. This white strip I put in, I carried over some of the background into the white also. And I also carried over some of the violet, the hematite violet, over into this. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, in the real world, there's always reflected light going around. So I just put a little of it in the white. Now, what I'll do from this point on is I'm going to start underpainting a lot of different items in here, and so I can get an idea of the relative intensity of the colors that I need to use. It looks like I'm probably going to have to go back into this brown again and lighten up some areas in here, but I'll leave that for later. And I very well may go in and put another wash on it. Like I said earlier, browns are, for me, difficult to work with. So we're going to continue on with this right here. Now this I had a choice of colors to use: raw sienna, one of the ochres, but I decided to use a color called bronzite. And the reason for that is it has a nice sparkling in it because there's some mica in it whenever they made this particular paint. Okay, we're going to go on now. This is the first underpainting of the background. I've pretty much completed the initial passage of this. I've introduced a red, cherry red, cadmium yellow, and a buff titanium. And I forgot to mention the white I'm using here is what is commonly called Chinese white. Now, for this, I took the buff titanium and I introduced some of the previous colors into the titanium and finished this out here. With the cherry red, this is a stainy color. Actually, it's quinacridone red. It's very intense and very stainy. And I put it in here and I introduced it into some of the Chinese white here, and I took some of the blue background and introduced it into the white also. And I used the yellow over here to make the M. Now what I'll do from this point on is I'm going to go in and I'm going to complete this background, the matte. I'll finish this off, and all this down here. One other thing, I had to bring in a smaller brush. I call them flats. Actually, they can be a flat or a bright. This particular one's a #1 bright, and I use it primarily to do the yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and now I will be introducing more colors into this, but I try to use the colors I already have and tie things together, because eventually it will all work in together, and it provides a certain amount of continuity in here. And I know right now I'll use this color here for this object here later on. I will introduce some of it, and I very well may mix it with some of it in here. And I try to keep mixing it, if applicable, where I can. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead, and the next time I talk to you all, I will have completed this portion of the background. Well, I've pretty much completed the background and the tray and the mat that's on the tray. What I did is I came back in with some additional colors here, but first I had to use a bigger brush. The other brushes are too small and the wash brush was too big. So I've introduced this brush into it. And I had to use a smaller flat for the whites and this particular line right here. Now, I brought in some more colors. As a matter of fact, I brought in a lot more colors. in anticipation of what's going to happen later. I brought in a yellow iron oxide. That I'm going to be using that for the French fries. You can see I started doing a little bit here on the French fries. And I brought in another orange, a French ochre, which is a little bit redder, and that I introduced in here also. And I'm going to use it for the French fries, and I put a wash of this yellow ochre on there. This burnt bronze is sort of a reddish version of this yellow that you see back here. I introduced a wash of that also. The burnt umber, of course, is a standard burnt umber, and it's a little bit reddish. A lot of the darks in here have burnt umber in them, and I washed that all over, and also washed in a layer of it here in the back here on this part of the tray. Alizarin crimson. I don't use it too often, but in this case here, I used it to do the shadowing underneath here. I introduced a little here, and I'll probably use it somewhere up in here and bringing it in here also. Another yellow, has sort of a greenish tint. Perylin, I believe is how they say that. I brought in an umber too. I found that this sepia, you know, it's sort of like sandpaper. The pigments are so coarse that when you brush on it, it sort of grates on there. The umber is not quite like that, and of course its counterpart, a little more of a yellowish, is the raw umber. And then for some more on the French fries, I used a little bit of Mars yellow, and I'll be using that. Most of this is the multiple colors of yellow here on the French fries. So I'll go ahead and the next time we talk, I will have done most of the French fries and the background in here, and all these negative shapes that you see in here I went in with the umbers and a little bit of sepia and stuff. Now also what I'll do is once this is really dry up here, is I'm going to go back in and I'm going to buff it with a paper towel. And what that does, it gives it a nice little sheen in here. And I do this frequently with watercolors. I like to work with the finishes. And particularly when there's quite a few layers of color in here. You can come back in with a lint-free cloth or something soft, like a paper towel, a good quality paper towel. And you can actually get a nice finish on this by buffing it lightly until it starts getting sort of shiny. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start working on this part of the painting here.